You know, it's funny, isn't it? It's almost like you can't even go an hour without running into some kind of marketing.
Seriously.
I was just thinking about it the other day. Like when you're a little kid and you start figuring out what all those logos mean,
Right.
to now, like just scrolling through your phone, you're bound to see some ad or sponsored post, right?
Absolutely.
It really feels like marketing's kind of woven into everything, how we experience, like pretty much the whole world these days.
It really is the landscape of our modern lives, isn't it? And that's kind of the foundation of why we're diving into all this today. You sent over Seth Godin's book, This is Marketing, looking for a way to like really get the core of it.
Yeah.
You want those aha moments, those key takeaways without, getting bogged down in all the details.
Exactly. Like efficiency is key for me.
I hear you. So that's our mission here, right? To help you really navigate this whole marketing world using Godin's ideas as our guide.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And I know you've read this book inside and out, so
Yeah.
I'm really relying on your expertise today.
Well, happy to share.
So, one of the things that stuck with me from Godin is this idea that, like, at its heart, marketing isn't just about selling stuff.
No.
He really focuses on this idea that it's about making change happen.
Yes.
And I thought that was so interesting. And he uses those examples like getting people who don't vote to actually go out and vote.
Right.
Or like shifting people from, always wanting to compete with everyone to actually wanting to collaborate more. So, I mean, just to kick things off, I'm curious, when you hear that, what kind of changes pop into your head, like in the work you do every day?
That's a great question to start with because I think, the temptation when you think about change is to go big, like change the world big, right?
There you go.
But Godin cautions against immediately trying to tackle those huge, world-altering changes.
I see.
He actually contrasts a very broad example, something like, I'm going to revolutionize education, with a much more specific goal. He talks about a bakery, by the way, and their commitment to making sure no one feels left out because of like dietary restrictions, gluten-free, dairy-free, kosher goods, everyone's included.
Oh, I like that.
That's a concrete, achievable change.
Yeah, you've got to start somewhere.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And one of the things that he talks about a lot is this idea of promises in marketing. Like every message, even if it's not explicitly stated, kind of has an underlying promise.
100%. He says that every message makes a promise, whether it's stated outright or, just implied. Like if you engage with this, you will get this in return.
Right.
And that promise is directly tied to the change you're trying to create, right, for the people you're trying to reach. So some of those classic examples Godin brings up. They laughed when I sat down at the piano, but when I began to play.
Oh, yeah. I love that one.
That's not just a cute line, right?
Yeah.
It's a promise of social status. It's a promise of respect.
Yeah.
And think about sports slogans. Roll Tide. That's a promise of belonging, of shared victory. Even something like Choosy Mothers Choose Jif, right?
Yeah.
It's subtly promising you status as a parent. You're discerning, you care about quality.
Right. You're making the best choice for your kids.
Exactly. So you're tapping into that desired outcome that people crave.
It all comes back to that, doesn't it?
It does.
And so, okay, you've got this change you want to make. You've got this promise that you're using to kind of like communicate it.
Yeah.
But then there's this whole question of like, who are you actually trying to reach with this message?
Right. Who are you trying to influence?
And Godin is very clear on this, right? You can't change everyone.
Oh, you can try.
You can try.
Many have tried.
And they fail.
And they fail miserably.
So he has this concept of the smallest viable audience. Can you kind of break that down for us?
Yeah. So this is where focus becomes so crucial. This idea that you have to really laser in on a specific group. Because if you try to appeal to absolutely everyone, right, you often end up, resonating deeply with no one.
Right. You get lost in the noise, right?
Exactly. You get lost in the noise. And you have to come to terms with the fact that there will be people who they're not going to be on board with your message. They're not going to buy into what you're offering.
That's a hard pill to swallow sometimes, I think.
It can be. But Godin's point is that, by concentrating on that specific well-defined group, you can really refine your message. You can create a much stronger connection.
So then he introduces this concept of worldview, which I think is so fascinating. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so worldview is basically this idea that everyone sees the world through a particular lens, right? Shaped by their, assumptions, their beliefs, their experiences, even their unconscious biases. We all have this lens.
We do.
And the key takeaway here is that effective marketing starts by acknowledging and understanding that worldview. It's not about trying to force your perspective onto people, but rather about inviting those who already share a similar outlook to connect with what you're doing.
That's a good point.
It's a subtle but really important difference.
So it's less about I made this and you should like it,
No.
and more about...
Exactly. It's less about, I made this so you should like it, and much more about what are you looking for? What do you need? It really shifts the whole focus, puts the audience front and center.
So it's meeting them where they are, so to speak.
Exactly.
And I think one of the examples that really illustrates this well is the one about Union Square Cafe.
Oh, yes. Danny Meyer.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Danny Meyer, he didn't just open a restaurant and hope for the best, right? He was very deliberate about cultivating a specific clientele. He was focused on those 600 people a day who would really appreciate what he was doing.
Right, his vision.
His vision, and crucially, become advocates for it, Spread the word.
Right, so it wasn't just about the location, the food, the ambiance. It was about
very consciously choosing who to serve and creating an experience that was, really tailored to them.
That's a coin.
And Godin, he really, he stresses the importance of resisting the temptation to, dilute your offering.
I see.
In an attempt to please everyone.
Right. Don't try to be all things to all people.
Exactly. Stick with serving that initial, smallest viable audience exceptionally well.
Yeah, and I think that kind of leads us into this whole other area that Godin talks about, which is the importance of empathy in marketing.
Absolutely. Empathy is like the bedrock of it all.
So he has this really interesting idea that every purchase a person makes is, in their mind, a bargain.
A bargain.
What does he mean by that?
So he's saying that every purchase, in the buyer's mind, they believe that the value they're getting, whether it's tangible or emotional, is greater than the cost they're incurring.
Right, which could be money, time, effort.
Could be money, could be time, could be effort. All of those things.
So it's about understanding their perception of value.
Absolutely. Understanding their perception of value. And one of the examples he gives is nonprofit fundraising.
Oh, yeah, that one really stuck with me.
Right. So instead of just thinking, we need $1 million donation, the fundraiser really has to understand the donor's perspective.
Okay.
Okay, for this $1 million contribution, what's the emotional return? What kind of impact are they hoping to make? Are they seeking, social recognition?
Right. It's about their story.
It's about their story. And if you fail to grasp that motivation, that sense of bargain, that's what Godin basically calls stealing.
Wow. Stealing.
You're not respecting their needs, their desires, their perception of value.
And that's kind of a harsh way to put it, but I think it really drives the point home.
It does. It makes you stop and think. And another key point he brings up is that better, this idea of better, is totally subjective.
Right.
It's not about some, universal standard. It's about what the customer perceives as best for them. He uses those examples like you go to the store and there are all these different motorcycle brands.
Oh, yeah.
Or different ketchup brands.
Yeah.
And each person has their own criteria for what they consider better.
Yeah, it really is about personal preference.
Totally.
Yeah.
Better is in the eye of the beholder.
So you've got to understand what better means to your audience, not just what you think it means.
Precisely.
Now, another example he gives, which I thought was really interesting, was the dog food example.
Yeah, what about it?
So he talks about this disconnect between the actual product and who you're marketing to. So in the case of dog food, you're not trying to appeal to the dog's taste buds.
Right.
You're trying to appeal to the dog owner.
The owner, yeah.
So could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so Godin says there are these two voices in our heads at play here. You've got the immediate need, right? The dog's hungry, the dog needs to eat. But then you've got the more complex perspective of the owner.
Right. They're thinking about nutrition, ingredients, maybe even ethical sourcing.
Exactly. Is this the best food for my dog's health? Is it, ethically produced? All those things.
So you're speaking to that second voice, the more nuanced one.
Exactly. Effective marketing often speaks to that second voice, that more thoughtful voice.
So we've talked about the change you want to make, understanding your audience, having empathy for their worldview and what they consider valuable. But then, he also talks about the importance of standing for something specific.
Yes, Taking a stand. Not trying to be all things to all people.
Right, and not being afraid to, like, potentially even repel some people, right?
Yeah, that can be a hard one for some people.
But it's about being clear about your values and what you offer.
Exactly. You can't please everyone.
So he introduces this tool, the XY grid. Have you used that?
I have, yeah. It's a great way to visualize things.
So how can our listeners use this grid effectively?
Okay, so the real power of the XY grid is not just, seeing where you sit compared to your competitors.
Yeah.
It's about identifying those key attributes that your ideal customer really cares about, right?
Okay.
And then you can use the grid to kind of carve out a unique space for yourself.
I see.
Godin gives this great example of a music teacher. Let's say you're a music teacher.
Okay.
You could define one axis as focus on serious technique versus, say, focus on enjoyment and fun.
Okay.
And the other axis could be prioritizes competition wins versus prioritizes personal expression.
Right.
So by choosing where you fall on those axes, you're defining your unique selling proposition.
Yeah, so you might attract students who are really serious about, mastering the technical aspects of music.
Exactly.
Or you might attract students who just want to, learn for the joy of it.
Exactly. And that's okay, because by making those choices, you're going to attract the right students for you.
So it's about being intentional,
Yeah.
right?
It's about being intentional and not being afraid to, maybe not be the right fit for everyone.
Right.
Godin also points out that sometimes choosing those less popular, less mainstream attributes can be really powerful for a niche audience.
Right.
He gives that list of emotional states that marketers often tap into, like feeling safe, beautiful, powerful, connected, all of that.
Yeah.
And it's about choosing which those you want to align with.
I like that. So it's about understanding your audience, knowing what's important to them, and then positioning yourself in a way that resonates with them.
Exactly.
And once you've kind of staked out that territory, you have what Godin calls the freedom of better.
Ah, yes. The freedom of better. This is such a key concept.
So tell me more about that.
So once you're clear about who you are and what you stand for, you're no longer bound by those old industry norms. You don't have to, constantly defend the status quo.
I see. So it's about being free to innovate and improve.
Exactly. And Godin uses this really interesting example of email marketing. He talks about how, back in 1994, to do email marketing, you needed a huge team, a ton of resources, a lot of money.
Right.
But today, thanks to technology, it's so much more accessible and affordable for individuals.
Yeah, technology has really changed the game.
Absolutely. So that's a perfect example of better in terms of, efficiency, affordability, accessibility.
It's about being able to do more with less.
Precisely.
Yeah. One of the things that Godin also talks about, which I think is always a hot topic, is this idea of free as a marketing strategy.
Ah, yes, free. The double-edged sword.
It can be tempting, right? To offer things for free to attract customers. But he raises some really interesting cautions about that.
He does. He argues that, while offering some value for free can be a good way to introduce people to your work, to give them a taste of what you do.
Right.
If you rely solely on free, it can ultimately devalue what you offer. And it makes it hard to build a sustainable business.
Right, because you're not generating any revenue to reinvest.
Exactly. No revenue to reinvest, to keep growing, to keep improving.
So what's the alternative?
Well, Godin suggests this really interesting distinction between free ideas that spread and expensive expressions of those ideas that are worth paying for.
I see.
So, for example, a chef might share some of the recipes online for free, right?
Yeah, as a way to build an audience.
Exactly. It's a way to build an audience, demonstrate their expertise, their creativity.
Right.
But then the actual experience of dining at their restaurant, that's something they charge for.
Okay, so give away the appetizer, but charge for the main course.
Exactly. Give away the appetizer, but charge for the main course.
Yeah.
You're offering value at both levels, but in different ways.
Now, shifting gears a bit. Yeah. Let's talk about trust. It seems like trust is so crucial in marketing today.
Absolutely. In today's world, trust is as scarce as attention.
And attention is in very short supply these days.
Very short supply. So Godin talks about these concepts of pattern match and pattern interrupt.
Okay, I remember that. Can you explain those a bit more?
Yeah, so pattern match is this idea that, people are more likely to adopt something new if it fits with their existing expectations, if it feels familiar.
Right, so it's about making it easy for them to understand and accept.
Exactly. It reduces the cognitive load. Then pattern interrupt is about introducing something novel, something unexpected.
Okay.
It breaks the pattern. It gets their attention.
So effective marketing often involves a balance of those two things, right?
Absolutely. A bit of familiarity and a bit of surprise.
And Godin also talks about this idea of creating tension.
Yes. Tension.
Not like negative tension, but a constructive tension that motivates people to move forward.
Right. He says forward motion relieves that tension.
So how does tension play out in marketing?
Well, this ties into status, which Godin argues is a huge driver of human behavior.
Status, okay.
People make choices, often seemingly illogical choices, based on their desire to, gain status, maintain their status, or even shift their status within a group.
Right. It's all about where we fit in.
Exactly. He gives this fascinating case study about Maasai warriors and lions.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
So traditionally, for Maasai warriors, killing a lion was a rite of passage.
Right. A symbol of courage and strength.
Exactly. But of course, lion populations were dwindling.
Right. Big problem.
Big problem.
Yeah.
So conservationists were trying to stop the lion hunting, but it was really difficult because it was so ingrained in their culture.
Yeah. You can't just tell people to stop doing something that's so deeply meaningful to them.
Right. But they came up with this brilliant solution. Instead of eliminating lion hunting entirely, they shifted the rite of passage to lion conservation.
Oh, I see.
So now, instead of killing lions, the warriors are protecting them.
So the status symbol changed, but the underlying need for status and recognition remained.
Exactly. They found a way to satisfy that need while also addressing the conservation issue.
That's brilliant.
It's a really powerful example, and Godin emphasizes that status is not just about, money or possessions.
Yeah.
A respected artist, for example, might have high status within their community, even if they're not wealthy.
Right. It's about how you're perceived within a specific group.
Exactly. And he also points out that status is subjective. What matters most is the status that's acknowledged and valued within a specific context.
So it's all relative.
Exactly. And then Godin also talks about the fact that status has inertia.
Inertia. What do you mean by that?
So he means that people tend to resist changes to their perceived status, even if those changes might seem objectively positive.
So they might be hesitant to, move up in status.
They might be, because it can feel unsettling, it can disrupt their sense of self.
I see.
So marketers need to be aware of that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
And then he presents this, 4-quadrant model of status, which I think is really helpful.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that.
So it's based on the interplay between self-perception and how others perceive you. So you've got, the classic imposter syndrome, where someone might have high external status but low self-belief.
Right. They feel like a fraud.
Exactly. Then you have what he calls artistic drive, where an individual believes their potential is greater than their current recognition.
Okay, so they're striving for more.
They're striving for more. And from a marketing perspective, you might be offering a pathway to that desired status shift.
Right.
Or you might be helping people reinforce their existing status.
It's about understanding where they are and what they aspire to.
Exactly.
Now let's move on to semiotics and symbols.
Okay, yes. The language of signs and symbols.
It's about how we communicate meaning beyond just the literal words we use.
Right. It's all about those subtle cues and associations.
And Godin talks about how professionals in various fields use these cues very deliberately.
They do. They design things, their branding, their messaging, their products, to kind of subtly remind people of the unique value they offer.
Right. So it's not just about what you say, but how you say it.
Exactly. It's about the overall feeling, the perception you create. And there's this interesting paradox here, right?
What's that?
For something new to gain traction, it needs to feel novel enough to be interesting, but also familiar enough to build trust.
So it's like a balance between new and familiar.
Exactly. It's like a dance between, competence and uniqueness.
And Godin says that the consistent promise you deliver on time and again, that's your brand.
That's your brand.
And he makes this distinction between brand and commodity.
Right.
Commodity is basically interchangeable.
Yeah, it's just a generic product or service.
But a brand carries a set of expectations, associations, feelings.
Absolutely. And a brand has loyal fans. Godin talks about true fans as those who have, engaged with you in a way that shows they expect future valuable interactions.
I see. So they're not just one-time customers.
No, they're invested in the relationship.
And that leads us to this concept of enrollment.
Enrollment, yes.
So what's enrollment all about?
So enrollment is the voluntary act of someone choosing to pay attention, to participate.
Right.
You can't force engagement. Anyone who's ever tried to make someone learn something they don't want to learn knows that.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. You have to earn people's permission.
So enrollment is that initial step where someone says, okay, I'm interested, I'm willing to invest my time and attention.
Exactly. It's that opt-in moment.
And Godin also emphasizes the importance of recognizing that not everyone is the same.
Right. Treat different people differently.
Yeah. So effective marketing involves catering to those specific needs and desires.
It's all about personalization and segmentation.
And that brings up this idea of the super user.
Ah, yes. The super users.
Who are they?
So super users are those high-value customers who have like a disproportionate impact.
Okay.
They might be your most vocal advocates, your most engaged community members.
Right, so they're not just buying your product, they're evangelizing it.
Exactly. They're spreading the word, influencing others.
And Godin says it's important to identify and nurture those relationships.
Absolutely. Cultivate those relationships.
Okay, let's talk about the marketing funnel.
The funnel. A classic.
It's a classic model, but Godin has an interesting take on it.
He does. He describes it as this leaky container.
A leaky container, okay.
You pour attention in at the top,
Yeah.
and hopefully committed customers come out the bottom.
All right.
But there are leaks along the way. People drop off at every stage.
And the traditional marketing approach is often about trying to plug those leaks, right?
Yeah, trying to optimize for conversions, minimize those drop-offs.
But Godin suggests a different approach.
He does. He says a more sustainable approach is to focus on building a loyal base where the top of the funnel is always being replenished by people who are already, familiar with you.
I see.
People who like you, trust you. So you're not constantly scrambling to find new customers.
So it's more about nurturing the relationships you already have.
Precisely. Building that long-term loyalty.
And he also talks about the sustainable direct marketing funnel.
Yes. Where the emphasis shifts from constantly acquiring new customers to, maximizing the lifetime value of your existing customer.
Right. So it's about building those long-term relationships.
It is. And he talks about the importance of the long tail as well.
The long tail. Remind me what that is.
So the long tail is this idea that, in many markets, the collective demand for all those niche products, each with maybe relatively small sales volumes, can actually exceed the demand for those few big mass market products.
I see. So it's about catering to those smaller, more specific audiences.
Exactly. And then he talks about the challenge of bridging the chasm, which is about reaching that mainstream market.
Right.
And he suggests that it's not usually this, sudden overnight breakthrough, but rather a more gradual process of building trust, fostering personal connections.
So it's about being patient and persistent.
It is. He gives this example of Zig Ziglar, the motivational speaker who was known for his really long-term relationship building.
Oh, yeah.
He would stay in touch with people for years before they ever became customers.
So it's about playing the long game.
It is. And at the heart of building those connections is the idea of a tribe.
A tribe. Okay.
So Godin defines a tribe as this tightly knit group of people who are united by a shared interest, a common goal, a similar worldview.
Right. They have something in common that brings them together.
Exactly. And he stresses that, commitment is essential for building a strong tribe.
Commitment from both sides.
From both sides. The leader has to be committed to serving the tribe, and the members have to be committed to each other and to the shared purpose.
That makes sense. Now, towards the end of the book, he has this chapter called Marketing Works When Done Right, which I thought was really encouraging.
Yes, it's a great chapter. It's all about taking action and not being afraid to make mistakes.
Yeah, he really pushes back against this idea of needing to be perfect before you launch anything.
He does. He says, ship good enough work. Get it out there, get feedback, iterate, improve.
So don't let perfectionism hold you back.
Don't let it paralyze you. And if your initial marketing efforts don't work out as you hoped, he says it's likely a problem with the approach, not a reflection of you as a person.
Right, so don't take it personally.
Don't take it personally. Marketing is a skill, and you can learn and improve over time.
So to kind of sum up everything we've talked about today from our deep dive into Seth Godin's For Me, this is marketing. It seems like effective marketing isn't about being the loudest voice, right?
No, it's not about shouting the loudest.
It's about making a genuine connection with people.
It's about understanding them, respecting them, and offering them something truly valuable.
And it's about creating those moments of tension that motivate them to move forward.
Exactly.
So what are some of the key takeaways that our listeners should remember from our conversation today?
Well, I think, one of the most important takeaways is the power of focusing on your smallest viable audience.
Right. Don't try to be everything to everyone.
Don't try to boil the ocean.
Find your people.
Find your people. And then the importance of empathy, really understanding your customer's worldview, their motivations, their desires.
Absolutely.
And the importance of standing for something specific, having a clear point of view.
Right.
And of course, the value of permission, earning people's trust and attention.
So as we wrap up here, I want to leave our listeners with something to really think about. What tribe could you be cultivating?
Ooh, good question.
What kind of community could you be building? And what level of commitment would it require to truly serve them and create that lasting impact?
That's a powerful question. It really challenges you to think beyond those traditional marketing tactics and focus on building something more meaningful, more sustainable.
Yeah. Exactly. So we encourage you to take these ideas, apply them to your own work, your own life, and see what happens.
Always room to learn and grow.
Always.
Always.